Hello, my name is Kurt Brown, also known as Saint Rambone. I have a website titled Mobile Audit Club. I was a bank examiner for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. I'm here to talk about murders that are sanctioned by the current regime in power. A man named Thomas Wells, who was a federal prosecutor for the federal government in the banking regulatory industry, was murdered in his office on August 11, 2001 in Seattle. That murder will never be solved because the current regime, current regime's federal agencies who investigate these crimes have been swallowed up by the international regime in power. They go after what I call red herrings in the communications field. We have those. We call those what they do. We want to distract someone from an actual trail of murder. This is a technological war. A regional director at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation in San Francisco was murdered in his office. That was labeled a suicide with his own gun. I survived an attempt on my life, and then the government actually did everything they could to silence me. They even used the Sheriff Jack Tillman in Alabama to silence me. The Sheriff Jack Tillman is now terminated, by the way, but he's such a low level it doesn't matter. And they actually gave him a decent retirement, and they pretty much shoved me in a hole and told me to shut up, and I had been harassed and basically tortured for years. Just today I went out, and this is nothing new, but I am harassed by the federal government and their little follow-along people, often these lower-level cops. They're basically nothing more than war criminals, little lesser men. Most of them are not that educated, and they don't really care about anyone. You got to realize, in the multi-billion-dollar industries, you can control humane humans across the planet, and you can basically have a slave race, across the planet, or at least a lesser slave race. You will notice they have taken over Afghanistan, they have taken over Kuwait, they've taken over Iraq, they've taken over Palestine, they've taken over Lebanon, they've taken away our human rights here in the United States. We are forcibly injected, or at least I have been, on numerous occasions since 2001, after being a bank examiner for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. My life was turned into a nightmare after working for them. Just today, I was out somewhere, and a man I didn't even know, he came up to me and he said, "Don't forget your chain." Now here I am, minding my own business, and an idiot who knows of me tells me, "Don't forget my chain." Isn't that something? I've been told, your hands are dirty. My hands are not dirty unless you consider the fact that I once worked as a blue-collar worker, which I do not have any shame over. I was an honest blue-collar worker. My hands are dirty in the fact that I owned a gun. It was a legal gun, sold to me by the current regime's gun dealers. Since that time, I do not really believe guns will protect you from the regime. This is a technological war, and it is international. They can knock you unconscious and have you shoot yourself with your own gun. You must realize these men are beasts. I'm hoping for a rise of a humane political party in the United States to remove the current regime. They're controlled internationally. If they cannot be removed, I'm praying that if we continue to suffer, that we will have a global war and the entire humane race will be put out of existence and out of their misery. I was forcibly injected on numerous occasions, and I have been made sick by those injections. I have been tortured. I have been jailed. I have been injected. I have been forced to sign documents. The current regime will not let my case be heard for that little gun thing they say I dirtied my hands upon. I investigate murders of deaths. I would like to investigate the murder of Thomas Wells. The FBI was pointing to some pilot saying this was the man who killed this man, who actually prosecuted multi-billion-dollar banking regulatory crimes, or banking industry crimes. The whole game changes when there's a lot of money involved in this. I encourage young people to protect their children from the current regime in power, or don't have children. If this is existence we have, we don't really need an existence where we are forcibly injected. Many of you do not remember Vietnam because you were too young, but the regime would force our people, the lower caste, humane humans, to go out and fight for them in their war. Their mass media promoted this. and their mass media still promotes these wars. Now they're pushing towards Iran. Let us not let them take Iran. Iran has harmed no one. No matter what they may do, they might strike another building and say, look, this was Iran. They're liars. You cannot believe anything they say or what you see or what you hear. In a technological war, you can be deceived from beginning to end. When I was working at the FDIC, a woman was in who told me, she said, you drop this EEOC complaint and we will have you terminated. I said, I'm not going to drop an EEOC complaint. They terminated me for it. It was a test to see if I would bend over for them. What happened was the EEOC would not hear my case. If you were a disabled veteran, I encourage you not to expect the government to give you any quota in that matter. If you have not served the military, I urge you to never serve the United States military or any of their allies. And I encourage you to be aware of serving the other side like I've seen some people do. This evil hand that's controlling our government and controlling international governments will have humane humans fighting each other on both sides of the fence. Now, if a nation is attacked, they have a right to respond. This brings up the very complex issues about whether you should serve that beast that I call the regime in power, whether they're on this side of the fence or the other side. Protect your children from conception, birth, school, and onward. I advise you to not have any contact. It's not that all these people are bad in these buildings. It's just you are in their buildings. You are among the government structure. When Thomas Wells was murdered, it was on August 11, 2001. I had gotten out of jail on August 12, 2001. He was murdered the day before I was released. Someone had mentioned something to me about Thomas Wells. Now, I don't know if it had anything to do with my release. Perhaps he was a gun control advocate. Perhaps he might have seen if he could get my release from jail. Being a former bank examiner and knowing that I was in fear for my life. Knowing that a regional director had been murdered in his office in San Francisco. I want to investigate the murder of Thomas Wells. I doubt I will ever be given those documents to do so. I would like to know every case he was working on. If so, I will need engineers to help me. This is a technological war. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe when I walked in the FDIC, I saw many good men in there. But I saw something too that was not right, particularly at the top level of the FDIC in San Francisco at that time. At the time, Sue Carroll was assistant regional director. She was the one that told me to drop the EEOC complaint and be terminated. The regional director was George Masa. He is no longer there at that office. He was appointed by someone in Washington, D.C., and I believe the entire federal government cannot be trusted in any matter with these monies. If I had to do it over again, I would never work for the federal government at all. I would never attend their public schools at all. I would not be birthed in their hospitals at all. I would not take any of their drugs from gestation to birth to childhood to adolescence to adulthood at all. I would separate myself from them completely. It amazes me that when I go out in the public, I am harassed to this day for just being a bank examiner who was honest and open, much like the Falun Gong in China. We are the humane humans. If we cannot get free from these people, we do not need to exist. They may not even be people. We could be dealing with something we're not familiar with. The money is in the billions of dollars. The control is for planet Earth. That's what the battle is for. Our future generations can become like slaves more and more, depending on how much they want to give us. When you deal with them, it's like dealing with the devil.